They laughed at the tattoo the moment she rolled up her sleeve at the cafe counter, and Maya felt the familiar punch of humiliation she worked hard to pretend didn't exist. The cafe was warm, cozy, humming with soft chatter and the grinding rhythm of an espresso machine, but to her, the atmosphere felt sharp, almost hostile, like a spotlight had been placed squarely on her forearm. She didn't roll her sleeve up for attention. She did it because the fabric was itching her skin. She hadn't expected the world to care enough to react, let alone laugh, but they did. The laughter wasn't loud, just that condescending, under-the-breath scoff that people use when they believe they're somehow superior. It cut deeper than a shout ever could. Two men behind her made no effort to hide their amusement. "Dude, check it out." One whispered, just a little too loudly, "She's got a trident. She thinks she's a Navy SEAL." The other chuckled, probably saw the symbol online and thought it looked badass. Instagram-style courage. Maya stiffened. Not because their words were new, she'd heard variations of that mockery before, but because they were so casually cruel. The tattoo wasn't pretty, not sleek or trendy. It wasn't meant to be. It was etched into her arm with raw, jagged lines, a trident broken down the middle, the crack stitched together with a thin thread of ink. It looked like damage. It looked like pain. It looked like truth. It looked like her. She kept her eyes forward, waiting for the barista to hand her the almond latte she ordered every morning. She forced herself to breathe slowly, the way her training had taught her. In for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. But the tremor in her hand betrayed her frustration. She hated that she still reacted to strangers' opinions. She hated that a symbol she once earned with pride was now a target. "You okay?" the barista asked quietly, offering her the warm cup. Maya nodded, managing a small smile. "Yeah, just a long day." The barista offered a sympathetic look, though she clearly didn't understand. Nobody really did, unless they had lived through it. Maya walked to her usual corner table, the one with the perfect view of the door and both exits. Old habits died harder than anything else. She slid into the seat and rested her bag beside her, adjusting her sleeve back down to hide the tattoo. Not because she was ashamed, though maybe a part of her was, but because she didn't want more eyes on her. She'd had enough scrutiny for a lifetime. She took a sip of her coffee, the warmth soothing her throat, and tried to shake off the lingering sting of judgment. She remembered the freezing ocean water, the exhaustion, the fire, like burn in her muscles during training. She remembered the night she injured her leg saving a teammate, dragging him through currents that seemed determined to kill them both, and she remembered the words afterward, words that had changed her forever. "You're done. You'll never heal enough to return. End of the dream. End of the life she had built around a single purpose." The tattoo wasn't a decoration for her. It was a scar she chose to show on her skin, a symbol of a chapter that wasn't supposed to end the way it did. She stirred her coffee aimlessly, lost in the past until the cafe door chimed again. She didn't look up right away. People came in and out constantly. This wasn't unusual, but suddenly, instantly, the energy shifted. Silence poured into the cafe like a cold draft. Conversations died mid-sentence. Cups froze midair. Even the espresso machine seemed quieter. It was the kind of silence she recognized, the silence of presence. Authority, respect. Maya glanced up. Standing in the doorway was a man she never expected to see again. Tall, precise posture, uniform crisp as newly pressed linen, metals glinting under the warm cafe lights. His jaw was strong, his expression sharp but controlled, and on his chest, gleaming above his heart, was the golden trident. Commander William Reeves, her former commanding officer. Her breath caught, heart hammering against her ribs. He scanned the room, and when his eyes landed on her, everything inside her froze. He didn't hesitate, didn't falter. He walked toward her with measured steps that felt like a countdown. The two men who had laughed earlier fell silent, their faces draining of color. Maya's pulse quickened. What was happening? Commander Reeves reached her table, stopped in front of her, and without a single word he saluted her. The entire room turned to stone. When Commander Reeves' hand rose in a perfect, disciplined salute, it felt like the entire cafe stopped breathing. Maya stood instinctively, muscles reacting before her mind could catch up. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She hadn't been saluted in years. Not since the night everything fell apart. Not since the day she was discharged. Not since she packed a life's worth of dreams into a cardboard box and walked away from the only identity she had ever wanted. "Ma'am," Reeves said, voice steady but warm. The word "ma'am" hit her harder than the salute, not because of respect alone, but because it recognized her, acknowledged her, validated the years she had believed were erased. She swallowed tightly. "Commander, you don't have to." He lowered his hand but stepped closer. "Yes, I do, and I wanted to do it where the world can see." Maya's throat tightened. She could feel eyes burning into her from every direction. The men who had mocked her earlier were frozen in their seats, gazes locked on the commander and then on her, their shame heavy enough to silence the entire back corner of the cafe. Reeves continued, softer now, "We heard what happened to you, how things have been since you left." Her breath hitched. "There's nothing to talk about," she said quickly, too quickly. The commander shook his head. "There's everything to talk about." He pulled out the chair across from her and waited for her to sit first. Another old habit, respect, military protocol. She sat, body stiff from nerves, and he followed, leaning forward with the calm confidence she remembered all too well from the training yards. "I didn't finish," Maya said, her voice cracking slightly. "I didn't earn the trident, not the real one. They took me out before I could." Reeves cut her off gently with a raised hand. "Maya, you earned the respect of every person on that field, including me, including the man whose life you saved, including those who watched you refuse to quit when your leg was shattered." Her eyes flickered downward. The pain that lived in her bones rose like a ghost in the room, crowding her chest. "You think passing a final test is the only measure of a SEAL?" he asked quietly. "Your courage didn't end the day your injury did." She shook her head. "But the world sees it differently." She gestured toward the two men in the back, who flinched as though the spotlight had turned directly on them. "They see a girl with a tattoo pretending to be something she failed to become." Reeves' expression hardened as he glanced over his shoulder, his stare sharp enough to cut through steel. The men dropped their eyes again, faces burning red. "Maya," he said, turning back to her. "You didn't fail. You broke your body doing what a true SEAL does. Protect the team, and you saved Corporal Jensen's life. He sends his regards, by the way." Her breath caught again. Jensen. She hadn't heard his name spoken aloud in years. She remembered his limp body, his blood in the water, the way his lungs struggled to breathe as waves crashed over them both. "You remember what the doctors said?" Reeves asked. "If you hadn't gone back for him, he would have been swallowed by the current." She nodded slowly, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Reeves reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a small, worn patch. It was old, edges frayed, but unmistakable. The golden trident embroidered on deep navy cloth. Not the tattoo, not the broken symbol, the full, unbroken trident, the one she had dreamt of earning since she was 18 years old. He placed it on the table gently, reverently. "We want you to have this." Her breath trembled. I can't take that. I don't deserve it. You deserve it more than anyone." His voice was steady, weighty with conviction. "This isn't about rank, or titles, or paperwork. This is about honor and bravery and sacrifice. You might not have crossed the finish line in uniform, but you crossed it in spirit, and none of us forgot that." She stared at the patch, unable to speak. Her hands trembled as her fingers brushed the fabric. Memories flashed. The freezing water, the agony, the shouts, the sudden silence when her leg snapped, and the moment she thought she had failed everyone. Failed herself. Reeves stood, and the entire room seemed to rise with him, not physically, but with reverence. He straightened his uniform, then saluted her again, crisp and precise. This time, Maya didn't feel like an imposter. This time, the room understood. The drive home felt longer than it actually was. Maya kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting lightly on the patch commander Reeves had given her. It wasn't heavy by weight, but by meaning. By memory, by everything she thought she had lost. The fabric was rough against her fingertips, worn in a way only something used, honored, and respected could be. It carried stories, some of hers, some of others. It carried a legacy she had believed she was unworthy of. When she parked outside her small apartment building, she remained sitting in the car for several minutes. The world outside was quiet. A dull city hum filled the distance. Lights flickered from apartment windows. Life continued around her, but inside her chest, something new, something soft and humming, had begun to spark. She took the patch with her, stepping into her dimly lit apartment. The space was small but neat, minimalist, practical. A couple of framed landscape photos hung on the wall, a bookshelf filled with old military manuals, adventure novels, and one worn-out binder of her personal notes from training sat in the corner. She dropped her keys into the little wooden tray she had carved herself during physical therapy. The patch she held, she set gently on her bed, as though it were a fragile artifact. She sank onto the mattress beside it, her back propped against the wall, her eyes moving from the patch to her tattoo. She ran her thumb slowly over the ink, the cracked trident, the thin stitch, like thread. The symbol had been born out of pain, out of loss, out of the moment she thought everything she worked for had been stolen from her. But now, after Reeves' words, she saw it differently. It was not a symbol of failure. It was a reminder of survival, strength, choices made in the darkest water, when quitting would have been easier. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a message from an unknown number. "We're meeting next week at the Veterans Support Center. Would love to see you there. Reeves." She exhaled shakily. She hadn't been to any veteran gatherings since her discharge. She never felt like she belonged, not because they rejected her, but because she rejected herself. She thought she wasn't worthy of sitting among real warriors. She thought they would see her injury, and as excuse, not a sacrifice. Her phone buzzed again. "The team misses you." Her heart twisted painfully. She hadn't realized how deeply she longed to hear those words. How starved she had been for connection. She had pushed everyone away after the injury. The guilt was too heavy, the shame too sharp. She had convinced herself she didn't deserve to stay part of the brotherhood she had fought to join. Now that belief was cracking. She picked up the patch, holding it close. For a moment she allowed herself to simply feel. Grief, pride, relief, all tangled together. Her tattoo caught the light from the lamp, the broken lines glistening softly. She whispered, "Maybe I didn't fail. Maybe I just continued in a different way." For the first time in years, the thought didn't sting. The next morning, sunlight filtered through her curtains, warming the room. She woke early as she always did. Routine never leaves you, it simply quiets. But today, instead of hiding her tattoo beneath long sleeves, she rolled her sleeve up deliberately. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection stared back, not defeated, not broken, but stronger than she had allowed herself to believe. She walked back to the cafe. When she pushed open the door, heads turned. She could feel the shift immediately, not the judgment from yesterday, but something different. Respect, curiosity, remorse. The two men who had mocked her stood awkwardly near the counter, their faces flushed. They exchanged glances before one finally stepped forward. We're sorry," he said, voice shaky. "We didn't know." Her expression remained calm. "You don't have to know. Just don't assume." They nodded, eyes lowered, humbled by the lesson they'd never expected to learn. She ordered her coffee and stepped outside into the morning sun. She paused before leaving the cafe window. Inside, people were still watching her, but not with ridicule, with something closer to admiration, recognition. She lifted her chin. The sunlight warmed the tattoo on her forearm, illuminating each line, each crack, each stitch. She didn't hide it. She didn't pull her sleeve down. She embraced it. Some stories didn't need to be explained, and some salutes, unexpected, powerful, unforgettable, spoke louder than any words ever could. Maya walked forward, the patch in her pocket, and a sense of belonging in her heart she thought she would never feel again.